quiet on the set.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Expert Witness with Doug Minor and Steven Palmieri, and a very special guest, Doug Holland. And we will introduce Doug here in a second. But first of all, so we've got Doug and Doug. We've got Doug squared here. So Doug Minor, how are things in sunny California today, sir?
Sunny. The waves are small, though. I didn't get to surf this morning.
All right, I think we got a little buffering thing going on. We'll let you get your signal in line there. So we'll introduce Doug Holland. So
maybe
Doug
I'll go
Holland,
surf.
Yeah, go ahead. Say something.
Steven, take the other Doug off.
Let's see here. Take the other Doug off. This is what happens when you guys watch us live. We're gonna go ahead and stop there. All right. So anyway, we are live. You guys get us raw, unfiltered. So let's introduce Doug Holland here. So Doug Holland is an expert witness, kind of in the making. He's done a few cases, but he really is an expert. It's just a matter of getting that witness part really ironed out. Doug used to work for Experian for almost 15 years, and interesting, we'll kind of get into it, guys. He and I had actually crossed paths at Experian before we were recently introduced. Doug Holland, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks, Steve. I appreciate you having me on today.
All right, very cool, very cool. So Doug M, all right, let's see, say something, Dougie. Let's see if we've got your audio fixed.
I'm here.
All right, excellent. Yes, we can. So let's kind of jump in. So for those of you guys watching, obviously feel free to comment below. I'm keeping an eye here on your comments, and we bring this to you guys to help you kind of get some good information and figure out, where you can expand your credit repair business into. Doug Minor started as a credit repair guy eons ago, and he did a little work for a lawyer once, and then the lawyer paid him, and he's like, what happened? I think I became an expert witness. And then of course, Doug Holland, working for Experian, has been in court cases and all sorts of stuff. So he kind of knew what it was like. And a big part of being an expert is having the experience, right? Really the knowledge and skills. And that's the biggest thing. And for those of you guys watching, running credit repair companies, we all have specialized knowledge. We've all done something before getting into credit repair. And we've looked at, hundreds, maybe even thousands of credit reports. And so we do have expertise. And what can we do to kind of step that up? So Doug Holland, where should we start? Let's start with you, man. How did Doug Holland come to be to where you're on this show today, man? Give us the quick skinny on your background, man. Let everybody know all about you.
Thanks, Stephen. After a military career, I returned to the state of Texas, and I joined Experian, started working for Experian. While I was there, I was a dispute agent in consumer affairs, and then I was also a 30B6 witness. So I learned, all the workings of Metro 2, the ACDVs, AUDs, carbon copies, you name it. I was watching the inner works, got to learn the inner works of how their databases work and how it works. Sometimes it may not work, but I've watched that too. I've seen that. So it's been an interesting experience.
No pun intended. The experience, right? It's been an interesting experience.
No pun intended. That's right. And
that should be your tagline. You're gonna have to go ahead and like trademark that. My life is an interesting experience.
Yeah, I don't want to get into any trademark issues with them. That's for sure. But,
all right. Well, I'll go ahead and trademark it in my name, and then see if they do something. If not, I'll sell it for $1. So
I don't think they're probably not a little happy with me right now, but that's okay.
That's okay. I don't think they're happy with very many people, except for the data furnishers and the consumers that they make a lot of money off of. But if they're not making money off of you, hey, so be it. So Doug Minor, let's get you chiming back in now that I think we've got your audio fixed over there. Now, Doug, you've been a qualified expert in lots and lots of lawsuits. You don't want me to tell the people a number, so we'll just say more than that's on this hand 100 times over. So,
even if we heard from Doug about the 3B6 witness, as far as what he was doing on that side, so the audience understands that.
Go ahead, take it away, Doug M. Lead Doug H. What are we talking about here? The 3B6.
Yeah, What were you skipped over? You said you were a 3B6 witness at Experian?
It's a 30B6. It's
Oh,
basically,
got
right.
it.
30B6, you're basically a corporate witness for the company. You're representing the company at depositions and trials.
So what
Yeah.
is 30B6? That actually kind of glazed right over me. I didn't catch that part. What does 30B6 mean?
The 30B6 has to do with, my understanding, it's a civil code. So when you're having a witness at, for a deposition or trial, then there's a 30B1, which is a personal testimony, so the corporation's not, represented, but as a 30B6, it's my understanding under the civil code, the, witness, the corporate witness is there representing the corporation.
Okay. All right. Well, so Doug Minor, you've done quite a bit of expert work. Have you dealt with those different types on the opposing side? Because I know you've gone up, you go up against the furnishers a lot, but you see the bureaus sometimes when
Yeah.
you're doing expert work, right?
Yeah. Sometimes when you go up against the bureaus, you'll end up with someone like what I would consider PMK, person most knowledgeable, that's working for whether it's Experian or Equifax, or even, let's say, somebody that's working at a mortgage firm, furnisher. But yeah, I haven't referred to it as a 30B6. I just refer to it as a person most knowledgeable from, let's say, whoever's on the opposing side. And you come across that quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go ahead and let's just get the what do we call it, the elephant in the room or whatever. Let's just go ahead and dispel that right now. Let's drop some truth bombs out for our audience, Doug. So credit bureaus will accept disputes on power of attorneys. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Because the credit repair world is full of a lot of people that kind of think, oh, you got to kind of like make it look as if it came from the consumer. And you were in the escalations department, and so you hereby for the whole world have pronounced that is not true, that you got to kind of make it look like it came from the consumer when it didn't. And a legal representative of the consumer is somebody that could be accepted. It's actually kind of segues into a really interesting story how you and I kind of met. So Doug and I were recently connected by an attorney, and then we're like messaging like Facebook, like trying to set up a meeting or whatever. And I'm putting him in my CRM, and I realize I've got a Doug Holland here in Texas in my CRM, and then I show that he worked for Experian. So I messaged Doug, and I'm like, are you the same Doug Holland who works for Experian? He's like, well, I used to. He's like, I used to. He's like, I'm sorry, have we met before? I'm like, well, I've got you in my CRM. I think you probably sent me a fax and signed it on one of my consumers, one of those escalations. I had a deceased consumer, I think, one. And we actually, the son wanted to get the credit reporting for the father updated. So we had sent you like the notice of death, the death certificate, and everything that I do is on my company's letterhead. Like literally my letterhead is on the top, and then, there's a power of attorney, and we've got the consumer's name. And then so when Doug and I we started talking, he actually kind of remembered me. And that was like, I actually really thought that was super weird, honestly, because I'm like, this dude's been working for Experian for 14 years. And so let's talk a little bit about that. So you were in the escalations department, and escalations department will send faxes if there's a fax number to the consumer or the consumer's representative. I've had that happen. And so let's talk a little bit about what you get, what does the escalations department do? And then let's talk a little bit about why my dispute stuck out in your mind. So I think our audience can maybe, learn from that. Like, hey, escalate your business up to the next level, right? It does matter. So first, let's talk about the escalations department. What does that encompass and entail from a dispute type perspective?
Right. The escalation department, now, just as a little disclaimer, that the one thing to keep in mind about all the CRA's policies is, since they are policies, they may change. So
Sure.
just keep that in mind that, I'll give you an example, like the fax number. I know while I was there, they've changed the fax number multiple times because they were so overwhelmed with faxes that they they decided, okay, we're going to change it. But anyway, so the escalation department, what is that? Well, it's set up to handle letters and disputes from attorneys, attorney general's offices from the states, the Better Business Bureau, uh, congressmen. So that's the type, and it doesn't have to be, I mean, I've seen letters come from county offices. So it's, or even city offices, like if, there's a complaint department at a city level, they would send in the complaint. I saw that a lot from Florida. They would come in and it would be routed to this escalation department and they would handle that.
And so, and law firms, you would get things from law firms on legal letterhead as well?
Yes, especially law firms. That's a common thing in the escalations department handles all attorney letterhead. So if it came in on attorney letterhead, now I will say there are some attorneys that they turn back. Then, of course, again, it's a policy. There was one particular law firm that they decided, oh, nope, that's a credit repair. We're not going to handle it. We're going to forward that to a different department and let them handle it.
So they shuffled it around, but they didn't like just kick it as frivolous, is what I'm hearing. They just rerouted it to some other department.
Right.
Okay.
It got processed, but it was just a matter of who processed it.
Gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, so you said you've got like some attorneys generals, some celebrities, maybe some municipalities write to you, some things like that. How often, and in law firms, so if we take all those out, then how often would you get an actual consumer dispute that wasn't a third party representative of some sort?
Well, I mean, if that wasn't a third party, just about everything that came into that department. Well, I'll take that back. Another thing that they would do is like if it was routed to the CEO of the company, so or in the C-suite. So if there was somebody in the C-suite that the letter was addressed to, it might get routed to the escalation department.
Okay, so and so if you take all the ones that you got, I mean, on just kind of a rough estimate, how many like power of attorney type, maybe we'll call them credit repair companies, I guess, I mean, people who aren't like these municipalities, governments, just a regular business trying to help a regular person, which is what my business model is. How often would you see credit repair type on a credit repair company's letterhead come through across your desk?
Not very often. Okay. It was one of those, the idea was that in your case, when I got your letter, it was at that time, it wasn't determined whether you were an attorney's office or not. So that was one of the things that, the escalations department handled letters from attorneys. If, they weren't sure if you were an attorney or not. So it got routed to the department I was in.
Yeah, interesting. And interesting that you remembered it and that we really are able to reconnect and stuff. And like I said, that case, I actually had a son came to me and his father, was deceased and he wanted us to, he was closing out the estate and he knew I did credit repair. We were doing the taxes. I do taxes as well. And he was like, well, hey, let's, well, actually what had happened was he wanted me to pull like the LexisNexis and all the reports to see what, because he was trying to close out the estate and see what the dad had. And then I'm like, well, we can notify the bureaus that your father's deceased, we'll need, and then I'm sitting there kind of thinking about it actually. I'm like, how do we do this? Because the bureaus are going to want like, so I'm like, I can't get a power of attorney signed by the deceased guy. But so I had the letter from the son, like the thing from the court stating that like he was, I guess, the executor, I guess is the term.
Exactly.
So I had like an official court document stating that the son, is the executor of the deceased person. I had that certificate and I got the power of attorney from the son. And I'm like, okay, well, I've never done one like this before, but I'm going to send this to all the bureaus. And then I got a fax letter back from you like, hey, we've updated it to deceased or something like that.
Right.
And so, really, really interesting. And I think for the takeaway for those of us, the guys here watching, the CROs that are watching is number one, take note of what Doug is saying. Like if you operate outside of the shadows, I mean, like it actually gets escalated up there, right? And I mean, so the idea that you have to that the bureaus are just going to kick things if it doesn't come from the consumer. I mean, that's just an old wives' tale. That is completely false. That's not what the law says. It's what the bureaus want you to think the law says, but that's not what the law says. And in fact, the bureau's correspondence, says we'll talk to the consumer or consumer's authorized representatives. And so, so interesting stuff. So Doug M. back in sunny California. So
I'd like to, if you don't mind, can I share something to kind of
yeah,
elaborate?
absolutely. Go ahead.
I think the one thing to keep in mind is that, I've seen power of attorneys come in. It's not uncommon. Let's say it didn't belong in the escalations department, but it's still like I would take care of it. Another one of my coworkers, somebody on the team would take care of it because it would have what we needed. It would have the power of attorney, or it has some sort of authorization that said that it was there, that they could act on their behalf. That's not uncommon. I mean, think about an elderly person, okay? Well, they're not sure what to do. They may have their son or their daughter helping them to get a hold, and that's common. It's like, here, I've given my son or daughter power of attorney or authorization to act on my behalf. Okay. I mean, you can even do that even if you phone in something, if you're able to call in and get an agent on the phone, if the person you're working with tells the agent, hey, this person is representing me, I want them to talk for me. As long as that agent gets that permission over the phone, it'll happen.
Yeah.
So now the other thing that I would say, that when it comes to your letters, it's not only just the authorization that they need, but they're also looking for, a copy of a government ID, a copy of a utility bill, a copy of a insurance statement, something that shows that that person is involved with the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's an interesting way of phrasing it. And actually, I think you've got a pretty interesting blog that you've posted about that, about the consumer being involved in the process. And so let's talk about what that means. The very minimum level, what a bureau would receive that makes them think the consumer is not involved. Okay, so let's suppose they get a letter. So if they get a letter and it does not have any supporting documents, driver's licenses, social security numbers, bank statements to prove the address, if they just get a letter, but let's suppose it does have name and social security number and address, but no other supporting documents, what happens with that correspondence?
Well, that depends. It depends how it was received. That might be one. You have to realize the people in the mail rooms they're taught to look for, like, it's interesting. I love this. Okay, when I was with Experian, credit repair was, the bad guys and the enemy and the evil ones, and
That's interesting,
I
because
leave.
when I was with credit repair, the credit bureaus were the evil bad ones. So it's
And that's what I'm saying.
Like,
it just amazes me leaving the company, getting away. You know how you kind of like when you pull yourself out of a situation and you're kind of like, wow, you just get a different perspective.
sure.
You get things, you're like, it's kind of like if you're this close, you don't see it.
Right.
Okay. But then when you pull yourself up from like a 30,000 foot view and you can see the whole thing and you're like, oh, now I get it. So anyway, it's just kind of funny that some of the things that the mailroom kind of look for is like, okay, did they get a big brown envelope with 100 letters in it, single page letters for 100 consumers? Okay, that's an indicator right there that let's just say the person, they just got one letter per consumer, no supporting documents. That's an indicator that they're saying that the CRA will say, oh, there's no participation from the consumer. Okay,
So if they receive a big package, but if there is like, so say there's a package with 100 consumers of disputes, but there is proper supporting for each one.
Yeah, that I don't know. That's a toss of the coin. They may say, yeah, we're going to take it. Well, maybe they won't. I mean, I've seen it. You were talking about the newsletter I wrote. I've seen them where they they refuse. They might send them what they call a suspicious mail letter. Are you familiar with
So
those?
there was a precedent last year, I think, right? Like that last year, there was a court case. I don't know if you're familiar, but where Experian got smacked on the back of the head, basically saying you can't do that, because there's nothing in the FCRA that says you can terminate the reinvestigation if you believe it's frivolous, but
Right.
you have to put them on notice and tell them why. But you can't just throw it in the garbage can if you believe it's quote unquote suspicious. There's nothing in the FCRA. So
They've
obviously,
done it. They've done it. They've actually, they made
and
a
there would be
business decision that we're not working those thousands of letters. We're gonna. So,
and it would not be the 1681I, I forget the subsection, but the notice of suspicion of frivolous, excuse me, they would not even send a frivolous notice as the
right.
FCRA requires. They would just send like a little postcard or something, right? Or would they just not send anything?
No, they wouldn't do anything. They would just, and it, from what I was told is that they just destroyed those letters.
Yeah, but what's really amazing is that this was able, I mean, it's amazing, but it's not really amazing because this is how the world works, but that these types of things um, have been able to go on up until last year when that precedent kind of basically came out where like, Experian, you can't do that. And so I'm going to assume they've changed their policies. I think you probably left before I think that came out and stuff, but so that's really interesting there. So Doug M, as you're kind of sitting back listening to this, I mean, you've been in the courtroom lots of times, and Doug Holland's got an amazing amount of knowledge. He's kind of building his career as an expert and stuff. So, what kind of things come to your mind from your expert witness and the kind of inside knowledge that Doug Holland brings to the table from the expert witness world?
Yeah, it's great. I really enjoy listening to you, Doug. There's different areas. So as you're talking, all these sort of things run through my head, questions that I have about cases, right, or a past case, or even I just got called on a new case this morning, and I'm actually on the defense side for the credit bureaus. So I'm curious. So let's say in any of the litigation that you've been in, have they subpoenaed, let's say, past information from the bureaus, and how did Experian deal with that? Let's say there's some litigation going on. They get a subpoena for a case that's, let's say, the information they're looking for took place 6-8 years ago. Do you have any idea like how they're going to deal with that or how they're going to handle it?
Well, anytime they get a subpoena from a court, they're going to address it. So it's, the judge is ordering that this documentation be provided. I know Experian and the other CRAs have custodians that they will, custodian of records that will go and search for whatever documentation is in the subpoena.
Yeah. If are they just giving them the raw data from, let's say, a time period that's requested?
Well, it's mine, normally, okay, that's one of the things I did also is I was an alternate custodian of records. What'll happen is that they'll go in, like if the subpoena says provide, okay, if they just say provide any and all records, well, that's a little different because a CRA is not going to provide just everything.
Yeah.
Because there's some documents that would need a
Confidentiality.
protective order. It would need a protective order before that information would be provided because they want to make sure that it's protected. So, but I know from
So
what I saw is that they, as a custodian of records, you get the subpoena, you look at it. Now, what you're talking about is a little different. There's subpoenas, but there's also discovery in a litigation case. So that's two separate areas.
so
You guys
different.
Y'all remember the Wolf of Wall Street? Now y'all are gonna have to keep straight faces because you're the ones with integrity that the bureaus can impeach. I really don't give a rat's ass at this point in time. But what I'm hearing from you is it's not like in the Wolf of Wall Street when he got the subpoena from the feds and he put it in a garbage can, peed on it, and lit it on fire. You're saying that that is
Uh,
not what Experian does. It's a little bit
I
different.
don't, I don't believe any of the CRAs are doing that, even though that's definitely Hollywood, but
Okay, all right. I mean, because sometimes it kind of appears as though they do that with certain things and stuff, but you're saying it does not happen. So we got a couple comments coming here. Sherry Gonzalez, she says this is stunning to me. It really is. Hearing from Doug, and she has a question. Okay, well, she's like, do they not have a legal department? So, because actually all of my disputes for like 10 years, I put attention supervisor legal department on all of them, and they come on my letterhead, but I never get nothing from anybody. I mean, you just get the regular responses. So how do you get the ear of the legal department at the credit bureaus? Do you actually have to serve them with a lawsuit? Let's talk about that for a quick minute here, Doug.
okay, there is a legal department, but it's not what you would think, in the sense that the legal department doesn't do anything with disputes, okay? It's the escalation department that handles all that. So it's called Consumer Affairs. So that's the department that handles it. But so there is a legal department in the corporate office, but as far as handling, all like we talked about, all the different attorney letters, attorney general's offices letters, Better Business Bureau, congressional offices, that's all handled at the Consumer Affairs Department.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you, what you didn't say, but what you implied was that the only way to really get the ear of the legal department is to actually sue them.
Well, it will get their attention. Yes, all the litigation cases are funneled through the legal department in their corporate headquarters. In an Experian's case, it's forwarded to the Consumer Affairs Department, where there's a sub team of the Consumer Affairs Department that handles all the litigation cases.
What about CFPB complaints? Do those go? Do you know where those get routed to?
The Consumer Affairs Department, there's a sub team on the Consumer Affairs Department that handles CFPB complaints also.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been submitting a lot of subsequent complaints to the CFPB, and interestingly, they like to kick those back through the portal. Same things I would mail to them, except they kind of dropped the ball since COVID and they don't like to process things. But and like I'll have the POA and I'll have my letterhead, but they'll kick it back through the portal and say, this is we don't have it. This is not, it did not come from the consumer and there's no authorization. I'm like, dude, like literally it's the exact same thing I would have mailed to you. You've been processing for 10 years. And that's happened to me quite a bit of times actually through Experian, which was really annoying. And so, which I guess, not to split hairs, but it kind of raises another question, because a complaint to the CFPB is its own little section of the FCRA that basically says the consumer can send a complaint to the CFPB and the CFPB should handle it. I think if we're going to talk what the law says, it's not even a dispute. What do you have to say about something coming from the CFPB? I mean, do the bureaus consider that legally to be a dispute, or do they? Because the FCRA, if you send it to the CFPB, it's an entirely different thing than the regular 1681I dispute process.
Well, the CFPB hasn't been around very long. It's, I think it's 2010 is when Dodd-Frank was passed. But one thing I've learned about the CFPB is, yes, is it considered a dispute? Yes. I mean, that it came through the portal, the agents there access the portal every day. They go through it. Now, here's what I've seen, and this is what happened probably beginning about, I'm going to say 2018 because I don't recall the exact, but let's say, they became more and more overwhelmed with disputes. Okay, not just CFPBs, but also the escalation department. And it was getting to the point to where not only then it affected the whole center because Experian let go like, I don't know, like 150 people. And, they were trying to save money. Well, it basically overwhelmed the system. And so everything was behind. They were, the 5 day statutory requirement where you get it within 5 days, you're supposed to, process the disputes. Well, that wasn't happening because it was, because there was so much volume. And then this one thing I kind of learned over time, just kind of watching is, they were trying to get the CFPB's ear saying, hey, all these are coming from credit repair companies. We shouldn't have to work them. Okay. Now, not all CRAs operate like that, but Experian did. They were trying to, keep from doing the work, and that's what would happen is that and I think they did. I think they got the CFPB's ear and because I know initially the CFPB was like, we don't want to hear it. Just do the work. But with the latest CFPB notice that just came out, I think yesterday or the day before, saying they're not going to, waive the statutory times or whatever. I mean, I don't know if you saw that. Did you see that?
Yeah, and just to kind of fill in, and especially if people watch the replay. So basically, like a year ago when COVID started, the bureaus kind of said, hey, we're not going to enforce the bureaus for not reinvestigating within 30 days, as long as they give it like a good college try, as they say. And so yesterday, the CFPB came out and said that, I think, in about a month or something, that memo is like going bye-bye, and they're going to start to enforce it again. So that's what let's talk about.
A good college try.
Yeah. So I know a really good FCRA class action attorney. I think hopefully he'll listen to this one day. Maybe we can you've got a lot of good stuff in there. Maybe we can change the system. And that's really what it's all about. Interestingly, because the FCRA came out like in 1970, 1971. If you read the very beginning of the FCRA, like 1681, not even 1681 A, B, C, or whatever. 1681 A is the findings and purpose of Congress. And it basically says that there is this elaborate mechanism that's been created, and the bureaus have a, quote, grave responsibility to fairness and impartiality. I mean, end quote. I mean, that literally is codified in the FCRA. And here we've got Doug Holland, with his inside experience and firsthand knowledge. And, he's saying it, look, I mean, if they get a big brown box with 100 consumers, they may just throw it in the garbage can and not even send you a frivolous, right? And so that's what we have to deal with here. And of course, on the flip side, I mean, again, in all fairness to the bureaus, there's a lot of crap that comes out of our industry. And I'll be the first to say that. I mean, you've got all sorts of crazy disputes, stuff that is illegible, stuff that is in violation of CROA for sure. And, we've definitely got to clean up our industry. There's no doubt about that. And that's kind of like where, okay, well, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? I mean, because when you've got people sending legitimate disputes, the bureaus still have an obligation, a duty to report maximum possible accurate information. So if they're put on notice, even if it's from the man on the moon, putting them on notice of errors, for them to just turn a blind eye to the fact that there could be errors, I mean, that goes against just their duty to report maximum possible accurate information. So, man, this is just like so much excitement. I can hardly contain myself, Doug. Doug Minor, getting back to you, man, because you're the guy who's been in the courtroom for years and years and years and stuff. So, how do you see, because we've talked on prior shows, Doug, about, the expert witness field in the credit repair arena is very, very slim. And there's a lot of folks with specialized knowledge that can go out and really carve out a niche for themselves. And I think Doug Holland really has a niche. I mean, he's got inside knowledge, firsthand knowledge, inside experience that you cannot get anywhere except for being there. Some of your experience in your cases, Doug Minor, I mean, how do you feel like, what Doug Holland brings to the table with his experience, how could that strengthen some cases potentially?
Well, I think I think probably the question is better having Doug talk about it. We talked before the show started. He's worked on a few cases. I'm curious as to the types of cases that he's taken on, and in his role in those cases, how did the attorneys describe what they were looking for him to do in the cases, right? Because I think that'll help the listeners understand there's these little areas, right? Like a lot of the stuff that I do revolves around mortgage related issues and the credit issues. So I'm curious, I think like the rest of us, we want to hear from Doug, the cases that you have worked on, what were they about? Maybe describe some of the cases, and was he on the plaintiff side or was he on the defense side? And give us his perspective. How's that, Doug?
Sure, I can do that. I will, I don't work for the defendants, okay? I won't work for the CRAs.
Okay.
I've made that choice. I believe I can best serve, the consumers and the attorneys that they hire to help them in cases. But I know that, yes, the cases, what do I help with? Well, I help to see, there's all these internal documents that the CRAs operate with. Of course, they're documents that they don't make public, and so I'm able to take those documents and I can see what happened. Okay, I can, I'm looking at the ACDVs, I'm looking at, logs, I'm looking at all the different reports, and I'm able to take all those documents and just kind of sit there and see, okay, this is what happened and this is what happened. And I'm trying to kind of bring the story in my expert report. So that way the court, the judge, a jury, whoever's reading that report can look at it and say, okay, here's what happened. So they know. And then I point out like the different, you talked about, I think it was 1681I, I believe, and just different parts of the FCRA that, it tells, the data furnishers and the CRAs, this is what it's expected. So that way they know, and then I can kind of follow what happened with the ACDV process. What did they do with the Oscar when they did the dispute? Did they use the right code? Maybe it's not so much using the right code. It's a matter of, a lot of times what I've seen is that, let's say, for example, one of the cases, the account was paid, okay, and it kept going on like the person still owed a balance, when you could clearly see from the documents that the account was paid. So something like that was one of my cases. I know that there's another case to look at is, and it was before I started, but it's kind of a standard, is that, let's say they have a mortgage and it goes delinquent, but, they sell the house, they pay off the note. Well, what did that CRA or what did that data furnisher, either one, do about those delinquencies? Because let's say it's, it's current, but then they're saying, hey, times are getting tough, I can't pay the bill. Okay, so they decide they're going to put their house up. Well, it might go 30 days late, it might go 60 days late, then it might go 90 days late, then they pay it off. Okay, well, what did they do with those delinquencies? Okay, well, I mean, if you think about it from a mortgage, think about this. If you have a mortgage, your payment's due on the first of the month. Okay, well, if you don't pay it on the first, and let's say you pay it on the 20th of the month, okay, well, you add that little late fee onto it and you pay it, but it still wasn't 30 days past due, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's say you don't pay it on the first, but you get to that 25th of the month or the 28th or whatever, and you pay off that note. Well, if you paid all that extra, you paid the fee, but why should it come up saying it's delinquent at that time? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Maybe it's delinquent after the first, but you shouldn't be reporting a 30-day past due because it's not 30 days past due.
Right. But even like I've seen where I've read testimony where here's another thing. Think about this for a minute. Take this, I'm going to give you a scenario. Okay, I'll use me as an example just to make it simple. Okay, let's say in March, I decide that I can't pay my mortgage anymore. So I'm gonna have to sell my house. I put my house up for sale. Okay, April 1st rolls around, my payment's late. Or, well, I don't pay it. Just do that. Okay, May 1st, it comes up 30 days late. Okay, still got my house up for sale, but come to June 1st, okay, now it's 60 days late. Okay, this July 1st, now it's 90 days late. Okay, I sell my house, I make pay it all off. Okay, well, what happens to all that? Now, let's change the scenario just a little. Okay, let's say I put my house up for sale. I go through that same time, but I'm July 1st, I'm 90 days late. July 2nd, okay, I make a payment and catch it all up. Well, no, let's do this. I make April 1st, May 1st payment, okay, on July 2nd.
Okay.
July 3rd, I make June 1st payment. Okay.
Okay.
All right. July 5th, because, the 4th holiday.
Right.
July 5th, I make that last payment and pay it off. What should happen with those lates?
Well,
Did I not catch them all up and pay it off?
the late still exist. It already happened.
Okay. But I've read testimony. Okay, here's the thing you got to look at. In the mortgage industry, right? You talk about the mortgage industry. What's the kicker? 90 days, right? Okay, roughly 90-day mark. Once it gets 90 days late, that's kind of a red flag, right?
Sure.
Okay, what if it was current, was past due at one time? How does that affect it?
As far as what though? If somebody's trying to...
Would they still qualify for a mortgage?
No.
Why not?
Because the underwriting guidelines aren't going to allow for the previous lates to... Previous lates are going to kick them out under most Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac underwriting guidelines.
But if he's current, okay, you're missing, maybe I'm not explaining it. But if they're current,
yeah,
may have some lates in the past, but now they're current.
Well, so most underwriting guidelines are going to want a clean mortgage history for the past 12 months.
Okay.
So if it happened, even if, let's say they pay it off, or like in your scenario, let's say the house doesn't sell, but for some reason they come into money and they bring it all current, right? But still you're going to have a 30, 60, 90, and then with your other, and then maybe a 30-day late after the 90, and then now it's current. Now, if they go after that point to try and apply for a mortgage in 6 months, the likelihood is they're going to get turned down, or they're going to say, okay, you have to go to a portfolio lender or a hard money lender, something along those lines.
Okay.
Or put a bigger.
What if a mortgage company says that, in testimony that they should have brought it current and removed the lates? What would you think then?
Do you mean remove the historical lates for the months where it truly was late?
Right. They said that they caught it up. So they said, and that's why I was given the scenario of if they made the payments on July 2nd, 3rd, and 5th, because the way that they said it was, okay, and this is, mortgage lender or the mortgage company said it was, yeah, we should have brought it back current.
Brought it back current. Okay, yeah. So, but obviously the historical lates still exist, but yes, it should be brought current. But then if we look at Metro 2, which segue real quick, if you were under testimony right now, if I were to ask you, what is the industry standard format for credit reporting? What would you have to say?
On the scenario I gave?
No, just is Metro 2 the industry standard?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the language that's used. Yes.
Yeah, the industry standard. So because Metro 2, you've got kind of like your account status field, then you've got the payment history field, right? And the payment history, like you won't, like if this is the current month, which is today's April 1st, you're not going to have your most recent payment history should be from March, because then you've got the account status field, which is your current condition. So, I mean, and then it always kind of trails about 1 month, right? I mean, that's kind of how Metro 2 works. So if they got it caught up, then it should no longer be delinquent for your account status. And then your next month, when this month's payment history reports next month, because it's always 1 month behind, that's why it's the payment history, it should not be, I guess in your scenario, it was from like 120 all the way back to current or something like that. I think you had 40,
Well, here's what
it should be current again.
I'm kind of sharing a couple of scenarios. So let me just think about this for a minute. If it went from 1 March to 1 April, I didn't make the 1 April payment, and then I didn't make the 1 May, then it gets to 1 June and I pay it off. That means if you think, well, let's even say the 25th of May, I pay it off. The idea is that it shouldn't just stop with lates. Does that make sense? That's what I'm trying to get at is if it was paid off on the 25th of the month, then if you paid that late payment and the payment, it shouldn't say that it was late for that month of May.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Current. It should show current. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, fascinating stuff. So, we mentioned real briefly about Metro 2. So, what was the extent of your training as it relates to Metro 2, which is the industry standard for reporting information?
Yeah, they do have, it was minimal training a lot of it was just dive in, a lot of self-taught, a lot of talking to my coworkers, and we would go through and try to figure out, okay, and they do have different documents that they would have that you could find out, okay, these are the codes for this and these are the codes for this. Now, the interesting thing, I will say that Experian, and it's my understanding, one of the other CRAs has this also. There's the Metro 2 codes, then there's the CRA has their own little version.
Yep.
So it's not just, but what happens is that let's just say an agent gets it and they dispute the item. Well, when they dispute it, in the background, the database will, whatever code that's put in for the reason code, it will take the Metro 2 code, and that's what's put on the ACDV.
Right. And then it kind of, let's talk real quick about eOscar, which is kind of the automated dispute transfer mechanism that the bureaus use. Now, my understanding is that starting maybe somewhere around 5, 6, 7 years ago, the bureaus actually forward like PDF type digital images of the dispute letters to the furnishers for every dispute along with an eOscar code. Is that correct? Or is that your understanding also?
It came out in, I believe, 2013. The CFPB has a white paper that they put out, and I think it was December 2012. And it shows on there that one of the things one of the problems before that time was the CRAs didn't have the capability of attaching documents to the ACDV. Before that, it was basically what they put in like a text type message with the ACDV trying to elaborate on what the dispute was. So if I remember correctly, in 2013, the CRAs came up with a system to be able to attach documents to the ACDV. And on the ACDV, it's all, okay, ACDVs, carbon copies, AUDs, it's all electronic. If you see a paper ACDV, it's the CRA's version that they were able to print to help with maybe research, or maybe they had to provide it in a litigation case. So it's not like the ACDV it's not typically, in a paper format. Everything's in electronic because, it's kind of like eOscar, it's automated. But anyway, there is a notation on the ACDV that shows that the data furnisher received it and reviewed the documentation.
Is there a limit to the number of eOscar codes per trade line per dispute that the bureaus can select to describe the dispute when they transmit it to the furnisher?
Well, if there's a multiple, let's just say if they get, a dispute that has a lot of items are disputing, like, like balances, gosh, payment history, whatever. They just include a large gamut of stuff.
Right.
What would happen?
That's what I do. Those are my disputes. I blow them up with everything. I give them one good chance to fix it, and if not, we're not happy. So if they get a Steven dispute, okay, go ahead.
That's it. And what would happen is that there is a code that is basically it's inaccurate. Okay. And with that code, it tells the CRA is telling the data furnisher, hey, this is inaccurate. And what it does, it's supposed to prompt the data furnisher to check all aspects of the account. So it's not just, it would be ownership and status. And it's supposed to tell the data furnisher to check everything about that account. And
Now, would that be internal policy, or would that be part of the eOscar manual?
It's not in that's CRA policy. It's kind of like this. If you're okay, and it's kind of like an agent. What does an agent do? They want to use the best reason to notify the data furnisher. But if there's multiple reasons that have to be addressed, then the agent will just choose the inaccurate, and that way it gets the data furnisher to respond to everything.
Let's say there was just 3 data fields, 2 or 3 data fields very clearly written on the letter. I mean, can they punch in 2 or 3 eOscar codes, or like, is there a limit to the number that the system can actually handle per dispute per trade line?
I've only seen 1 code per item, so it's kind of like you have to pick the best code. So that's why if you look at the ACDV, if you've seen a printed version of the ACDV, it's kind of like a landscape format, and it'll have 1 code. It's not like, it wouldn't have like multiple codes on it.
So let's dial this back for our listeners who are CROs here for a practical application. There's, I mean, it's online, it's in my training course, all the eOscar codes, there's like 20 or 30 of them. I mean, you can see what they are. And if you really understand Metro 2 and how to read the reports, and especially if you compare the reports against each other, a lot of times you can find 5 or 10 data fields, at least they're inconsistent. And it's like, you guys have one standard, which is Metro 2, your 3 bureaus, I don't even know what it is. I just know you can't be reporting the same field 3 different ways based on your one standard. So to dial this back to the practical application, is it, because the enemy is always getting things kicked as frivolous or irrelevant. So if you were to tailor, and again, if these are ethical and proper disputes, if you can truly find an element of the trade line that matches a separate eOscar dispute code and just write a very concise, short dispute for a trade line, each round if they read it right, it would trigger a different eOscar code. In theory, I mean, could you go through 10 disputes to them if they trigger a different code without them kicking it as frivolous? Or is there just kind of like a point beyond, they're just like, dude, we saw this 90 days ago, we're done with you, we're kicking it as frivolous?
Well, the logic is when they look at it as being frivolous, it's let me think. It's called a repeat dispute. If you do not provide additional information, something that's additional that wasn't given previously. So it's called additional relevant information. So that's something to look for, is like when you're disputing something, what is it that I haven't provided? And the two things you're looking for is some sort of document to substantiate, your dispute. So let's say you disputed something previously, but you didn't have a certain document to provide. Or the other way for additional relevant information is a story. So they share a story about uh, something about that account that wasn't provided before. That so
So
uh,
let me ask it to you this way then. So that all makes a lot of sense. But let's suppose the first round, just for the sake of kind of like where we're going here, the first round you just dispute the balance, and it is genuinely you've got an issue. And then the second round you dispute the high limit, and then the third round you dispute, the date last payment received, and the fourth round you dispute the payment history profile, and the fifth round you dispute the portfolio type, and so on and so forth. And it's very clear that like it's like a one sentence dispute. Like I have an issue with this field very specifically. Clearly that would be new information, right? I mean, it'd be hard for them to like be hard for a judge to say this wasn't new information. I mean, but it is new information when you look at it against their industry standard because they're separate fields. So um, in theory, if they looked at it and they read it and they saw it and they didn't have like that code in the system from before, that EOSCR code, would it like if they put in that correct EOSCR code for each one of those elements each time, if they did that properly, would it not trigger a frivolous? Is that a reasonable statement?
well, the agent has to look at it to make a determination if it was frivolous or not. It's not the agent's going to use discretion on that. Like when an account is being disputed, the account is brought up on the computer screen, and a person can like hit a button and see the history of what's been disputed in the past. So, the agent's going to make that determination on, are they going to, you know, say that this has already been disputed, we're not going to do anything else? Are they going to say it's frivolous? Or is that agent going to say, you know what, I think I'm going to do it again and attach the documents to the ACDV and send it out?
Is there a way to bypass the agent? I've heard people say like if you try to just get it which okay, well let's back up. Do they scan OCR? Do they digitally scan every dispute that goes in there?
Right. All the mail is scanned.
Okay, and then they try to OCR and like do they try to have the computers read and interpret all disputes before they hand them to a human?
No, I've never seen that. It's
Interesting. Okay, so in your
all
experience, you don't think that,
basically the mailroom scans in all the mail. It's sorted. I mean, like when we were talking earlier about the mail that they said where the consumer didn't have any participation.
yeah.
That decision's made at the mailroom. That it's not even scanned in, or if it is scanned in, they're going to scan it in, and they're going to send that suspicious mail letter out saying that we don't believe that this came directly from you.
Yeah. Okay, so in your experience, humans touch all disputes. None of them bypass humans by being, they don't have a system based on your knowledge that they'll scan them, they'll try to read it, they'll try to interpret which EOSCR code the dispute is, and it'll just automatically shoot to the furnisher. Is that not something that you're aware of?
Right. I mean, the only thing that I've seen where, it's kind of like, think of there, you can do internet disputes. So there
Okay,
are
yeah.
ways to do internet disputes. So that would be the only thing that I can think of that an agent's not involved.
Yeah, interesting.
But if they're like, they have an upload system where you can upload documents that you're uploading proof. Well, even though you're uploading proof, it's still going to go, to an agent.
So this thing is like a nuclear bomb full of just all sorts of goodness here. But the one thing I think from the expert witness litigation thing that I think I took away from you is that you said that ultimately, regardless of what's in the letter, the agent has discretion based on kind of the overall consumer file. When he looks at it, if there's a bunch of history, he has a discretion to terminate a reinvestigation as frivolous, or even more so before they even open up the file to just throw it in the garbage can as suspicious. He's got that discretion based on your understanding of company policy, I guess. And I'm being facetious about the garbage can. I'm not obviously putting you on the spot there, but as far as like you get a dispute, they could pull it up in the computer. And so they're not really duty bound, for lack of a better word, under company policy, which hopefully the policy conforms to the FCRA's requirements to report maximum possible accurate information. And they get something that's well crafted, and clearly it does have different things, but if guy thinks it's just some crazy letter, maybe from a credit repair company or whatever, company policy is that you have the ability to terminate this as frivolous. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Well, right, the agent does have discretion to look at it and say, okay, did we already address this before, or is it something that needs to be addressed now?
Okay, so from a consumer defense litigation perspective, I guess as we kind of wrap this show up, man, we've been going, we could keep on going, but we don't want to go like midnight madness here. But as a consumer, if you've got attorneys that are litigating against the bureaus, would you think it would be an absolute must to, if it gets, to where they've got to do discovery, to find out what happened at the control center right there, like when the guy pushed the button and made a decision? Like if you could give our CROs something, and then the attorneys who are watching this, like one nugget of, look, here's kind of like, I'll say it, not you, here's kind of like the Achilles heel of like where the arbitrariness of the whole system comes in. Because what I basically heard was they've got this fabulous electronic system with codes, but there is this nebulous, arbitrary, like just kind of like, somebody's got to make a decision on it. What would you suggest for consumer defense attorneys that are litigating against these companies? Would they for sure want to, ask some discovery on what would be the proper way to kind of word a discovery question? Like, what did your agent, how did he make a decision? How did he determine, which codes was he looking at? Did he pull the history? What did he see in the history? I mean, can you, you know what I'm trying to ask? How would you load my lips up here, Doug, real quick for our attorney friends?
Well, the documents, the logs will tell you. They've got different reports that'll tell you what happened. So it's just, yes, if an attorney is looking and they're trying to figure out what happened, all the CRAs have their internal logs that they use, and it'll, basically list out what happened. And then you can just kind of follow, the step-by-step, that went to the mail, it got scanned, it loaded into their system, the agent got it, the agent, did this, that, and what they, as far as what they were thinking at the time when they did it, well, I mean, I don't know what agents are thinking at that time. I mean, some of the things that I know that I went through, and some people that I know went through, was that, you're trying to hurry. You're trying to get it done as fast as you can, and you're trying to make sure you don't make any mistakes.
That the grave responsibility to fairness and accuracy that's enshrined in the beginning of the FCRA there, huh?
Well, but the other thing to keep in mind is that since the pressure's on, mistakes are made.
Yeah.
Items are missed. Things are overlooked. Okay.
Well, hold on a second here. Now, why is the pressure on? Is that a bottom line financial motive, Doug? I mean, why would there be pressure on these people to treat it like a sweatshop? I don't understand. Can you elaborate? Is there some financial incentive?
Well, their livelihood at the are they going to be gainfully employed, or are they going to be out looking for another job?
Well, hold on a second. So, but I mean, their employer is bound to the FCRA's grave responsibility statutory enshrinement. So, are you saying there's some corporate policy that there's kind of a fine balance between grave responsibility, fairness, and accuracy, and Chinese sweatshop? Is there some balance there?
I will say this: there are standards in place. Okay, they have to make sure they meet those standards. Okay, and if they don't meet those standards they have to produce so much work, and they have to meet a certain level of quality. And if they don't meet that, then they, are maybe on some sort of notice or corrective action for a certain length of time. And if they don't meet that during that corrective time, then they may find themselves looking for another employment.
Like the movie Office Space. Your manager's going to come, yeah, Doug, we've noticed you've deleted way too many trade lines lately, and we're going to need you to go ahead and rethink how you're evaluating these. Okay, so as we wrap it up, we've got Sherry Gonzalez. She's kind of posted a bunch of good stuff, but real quick, she says, good question. So what if you, number one, what if you specifically address your dispute to the escalations department? Does that mean anything? Or is it more like, is it still going to go through and work its way through the routing system regardless of to whom it's addressed?
It may or may not make it to the escalated department. It's a matter of, the escalation department, when it comes to that department, the files are actually assigned to an agent, and an agent will have that file assigned to him or her for, as long as they're in that department.
Okay, so maybe or maybe not. And second question, what if you send a dispute or a notice to the Bureau's registered agent? Like, I guess if you're not sending them an actual lawsuit, but if you mail something to the registered agent, I mean, has that happened?
Sure.
Does that get treated differently?
No, it wouldn't. It's just going to go, and be processed. Like, in my eyes, send it to the registered agent, it's going to take longer to get processed.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting stuff here. So as we wrap this one up, okay, we need some real juicy secrets. So, assuming that what you're about to tell us can be used in conformity with CROA and FCRA, what are some of the trigger points that'll auto escalate that thing up to the escalations department? Deceased consumer is one of them, I believe, right?
Right. If the consumer writes to anybody in the C-suite, the CEO, the CFO, anybody like that, it's normally escalated to the consumer affairs department.
Well, I think that's, I hope too many people don't watch this, because we're gonna have like 100,000 disputes a month, going to the CEO of Experian.
Well, and like I said, they changed how they've done things over the years. It just depends on.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good stuff there. So, man, this has been. We're gonna have to have you back here, Doug Minor. What do you think, man? Wrap us up here. Take us in for the landing, Doug Minor, man. What do you have to say about all this? I'm just amazed by Doug Holland over here. It's craziness.
Yeah, it's some really great information. Especially I think for the listeners that being credit repair organizations, to hear all this stuff has got to be awesome. But I think it also points out, look, he's going to be able to do the expert witness work based upon his background, but it shouldn't stop any of the credit repair organization people to do it either. So, no, it's super great to hear from Doug and hear his stories. I like it.
Good stuff. So Doug Minor, we'll take it in for landing with you. So Doug Minor, qualified expert witness. You also love to train people. How can people get in touch with you, Doug Minor?
Sure, it's super easy. Just Doug@DougMinor.com.
Doug@DougMinor.com.
They can email me or they can call me. The phone number's there.
All right.
Or DougMinor.com, my website. Easy. Just
Doug@DougMinor.com. There we go. And then Doug Holland, tell us how can the world find you and blow your inbox up and help you fight the good fight for the little guy, man?
Right. My email address is doug@holland.biz. That's doug@holland.biz. I spell my last name HOLLON. And then my website is www.cntx.biz.
CN like Central, TX like Texas.biz.
Yeah.
CN, okay, TX.biz.
So it's Credit Experts of North Texas.
Awesome, good stuff there. And then of course, if you guys like this, we bring this for you guys. We do have a credit repair training course, which both of these esteemed experts are actually in, $99 a month with a free trial. And we've just got more content than you could possibly shake a stick at. So if you like this and this is free, imagine what you're going to get when you start to pay. Go to creditrepairtrainingcourse.com or shoot me a message. I would love to talk to you guys as well. Look, we've got the wonderful contents from Sherry. We've got the thank yous from Nicole Ashley, Rachel Kite, thank you. Sherry M. Gonzalez, Doug, I sent you both requests. So look at that. So as we wrap this one up, thank you guys for watching. And thank you guys, Doug and Doug Squared, for being here. And we will see all of you guys on the next episode. You guys take